Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and we are joined for a transfer show by Dharmesh Sheth from Sky Sports News. Once again, Dharmesh, it's great to have you on as always during the transfer window. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Happy New Year. Can we still say that?
I think we can.
It's quite a way into the new year.
I think it's still very new, isn't it, in the grand scheme of things? Yeah. There's 348 days left. I think that's, pretty new. I'll tell you what there isn't 348 days left of is the transfer window. We're already a week in, or 4 or 5 days in at least. And we just feel like we're starting to get a bit of momentum at Manchester United now. I feel like first couple of days of the window, is it open, is it not open? And then all of a sudden, in the last sort of 24 to 48 hours, kind of half a dozen names have all come in at once. So we're going to go through exactly who United are looking at, and maybe even if it's going to be a bit more outs than ins in this window, we'll go through all of that as the window goes on. But let's just start with the biggest news of the last sort of month or so at Manchester United, Marcus Rashford. He's someone that was sort of ostracised, exiled, whatever you want to call it, by Ruben Amorim for, supposed indiscretions that were never fully named or detailed by Ruben Amorim. There's now rumours and reports that he may well leave in January, whether that be a loan or a permanent deal. What's your understanding of the current situation with Marcus Rashford and his future at Manchester United?
Yeah, so the information we have is that all options remain on the table with regard to Marcus Rashford. Now, AC Milan, we're told, are one of a number of clubs who are kind of internally discussing whether to make an approach to Manchester United about trying to do a deal in January. Now, as far as Milan are concerned, and it will probably be the case for any other club that are interested in this month of the transfer window, it would probably have to be a loan. And Milan, in particular, would need Manchester United to cover a huge portion of Rashford's high wages. As far as Ruben Amorim is concerned, he gets asked the question on nearly every single news conference that he does, and every single post-match interview that he does, because Marcus Rashford has been left out of the squad altogether. He came back to the squad against Newcastle. He was an unused substitute there. He was then ill for the game against Liverpool. So he seems to be in the news nearly every single week because of his absence. But Ruben Amorim has maintained, without really alluding to the interview that he did where he said he needed a new challenge and the next steps in his career, simply by saying it's up to Marcus Rashford. It's up to him. The onus is on him to force his way back into the squad, into the first team. So I think when I say all options are open, there are obviously ideal scenarios and not so ideal scenarios as far as United are concerned. I would guess the number one option for Manchester United would be Marcus Rashford trains brilliantly for United, gets back into the team for United, scores goals for Manchester United. I'm sure that that's what Ruben Amorim and the Manchester United fans would want, and that would lead to one of two things happening in the summer. That Ruben Amorim will say, well, I can trust this guy again. We can move forward with Marcus Rashford. He's still under contract and he's a big player for United. Or he'll have played well for United, and that will only do one thing to his market value, and it will enhance it. So that would be the ideal option from what I can tell. The other option is the loan. And I guess the optics don't look great on that. And the PR wouldn't look great on that either. If you allow someone like Marcus Rashford to leave the club on loan and pay some of the wages, if not the majority of the wages, to the team that he would be going to. So like I said, that wouldn't be the greatest of looks. But there is another way to look at that scenario, and that is using the Jadon Sancho situation as an example. Because if Marcus Rashford was to go on loan, even though United would be paying the fees, a lot of the wages for the rest of the season, if he was to go away and play really, really well, then he would come back to United in the summer with an enhanced market value. It would almost be a calculated risk. Because if you were to try to sell Rashford right now, what kind of price would you get? It's unlikely a club would be willing to meet the valuation that Manchester United might have on him. If you go back to what happened with Sancho, his was slightly different in that he fell out with Erik ten Hag in September, and there was 4 months where he didn't play at all. And United knew that if they tried to sell him in the January, he's almost worthless because he hasn't played. They got lucky because they did the straight loan to Borussia Dortmund. He played really well for them, was key for them getting to the Champions League final, came back in the summer, and Chelsea thought, there's a player in there, let's take him on, with an obligation to buy for a fee of over £20 million, which is probably going to be more even though it's far, far less than the £73 million Manchester United paid Borussia Dortmund, but it's probably going to be more than what United could have got had they tried to sell him in the January before he went to Dortmund. And the same probably could be said for Rashford. Of course, there is that risk that if he was to go on loan and it didn't play well, then United are effectively back to square one in the summer. But I think United have got to weigh up all of these options. If they are deciding that he hasn't really got a future, then probably the best thing is to try and sort out a loan deal that's both favourable for Rashford, but more importantly to United.
It's quite embarrassing, really, that we keep finding ourselves in this position, and we've got such an obvious, like, almost carbon copy example to look at in Jadon Sancho. Most clubs don't have it where their biggest earners in the likes of Sancho and Rashford have both been chucked out of the squad for basically kind of off the field, or certainly off the game field indiscretions, and we have to find a way to sell them. Like, why does this keep happening? I can't believe that, two of the biggest earners at Manchester United over the last 2 years both were sort of struggling to get out the door because the manager refuses to play them. I don't see other teams in this sort of situation very often. Certainly not with like some of their biggest players in the squad, the likes of Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford. It's such a shame that it's come to this, and now, we're hoping that the likes of AC Milan, or I think Juventus have been mentioned, Borussia Dortmund, another one that's been mentioned, will turn up and basically bail us out of a terrible situation. It's just, I
think Arsenal fans were probably thinking the same thing a few years ago when they decided to terminate the contract of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and get him out of the club. And because they decided then, after years of flirting in and out of the Champions League, they weren't getting into the Champions League, they weren't performing in the league, that something had to change. United fans have always said, look, it's not been great since Sir Alex Ferguson left. There's been a few highs, there's been a few trophies, but there hasn't been that feeling that something sustainable is going to happen at United. It seems to be the focus on the short term. Every time you hear Ruben Amorim talk, he always seems to be saying this one phrase: this club needs a shock. And maybe this is the time where finally United are going to take a step back and think, we're going to have a bit of short-term suffering, maybe even slightly longer-term suffering, to get to the place that we need to get to, because everything that's been tried in the past hasn't worked. And now they've got this new structure there. You feel that, the actual structure, however, whatever criticism you have about some of the dealings that they've done, but they've actually got the structure in place now. And they brought in a manager who, despite some of these results, the growing consensus is that whenever you hear this guy speak, you sit back and you listen to every single word that he says. And what's more, you're almost believing every word that he says as well. And that's the massive difference now. So whereas people are thinking, how can they get rid of Rashford? He's one of our own. He's come through the academy, all of this kind of stuff. That's kind of turning into, if Ruben Amorim wants to do it, if he thinks this is right, he needs to be given the opportunity to be able to do what he wants here.
Yeah, I think that at some point we have to give control and give a bit of power to someone and say, what do you need? We'll sort it for you, with obviously a view to the future. But like I said, that's where the likes of Wilcox and Berardi come in, where, here's 8 players we think can work now and longer term. Which ones do you like? Let's go and sort it. If that's what's happening, then so be it. And that's the.
I don't know what you think, Joe. You're obviously a match-going fan. You'll cover United nearly every single day. You're covering them every single day, clearly. Just what your opinion on it is. I always see on social media, these things where lots of influencers or pundits, and they play the keep or sell game.
Yeah.
And, you see, sometimes you hear of almost the entire squad they need to get rid of.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a halfway house here for me, because if you compare United at the moment, and you can't really, with the likes of Liverpool and City, to a certain extent Chelsea and Arsenal, just say, for example, all of the teams that I've just mentioned, including United, say they needed to bring in 5 or 6 players. The difference between United and these other clubs is that the other clubs, of those 6 players, for example, if they wanted to bring them in, 1 or 2 would probably get into the first team, whereas the other 4 are going to be closing the gap in quality between the first team and the bench and the squad. Whereas United, it's almost like they need 5 or 6 that are going to go into the team.
Yeah.
And so it's not a case of you need to get rid of the players that are in the squad at the moment. Yes, of course, clearly there are going to be some players that have come to the end of the road at United, and they need to bring in money as well, because that's the way it's going to work for United just now because of the financial situation. But, the likes of, De Ligt and Martinez, who are the first teamers, do they maybe need players who are going to provide even better competition for them? And maybe they'll find themselves having to fight really hard to get into the first team positions, rather than it being simply get rid of 15 players, bring 15 players in. We know that is completely impossible. So this is why, from an outsider, when I'm looking in and I'm looking at what United are doing, and especially what Amorim is doing, and there's been a bit of criticism with some of his team selections, and he keeps changing the team, he keeps changing his centre halves. It's almost like he has given himself this season as feeling his way in, because if you remember, he said he wanted to come in the summer.
Yeah.
The big reason why he wanted to come in the summer, because he wanted a fresh start, clean break. United, to their credit, we want you, but it's now or never. Make your mind up. This is Man United. And in the end, he came. But when he came, he said, you've employed me because of what I've done at Sporting. And what I've done at Sporting is been based on this formation that I play with 3 at the back. You don't play 3 at the back, but that's what I'm doing. And the worst thing that probably could happen is if, for the sake of short-term results, he goes back to 4 because the squad are used to it. That simply can't happen, because we've seen with Erik ten Hag as an example, he never really played the way that he was employed to play for.
No.
He was doing so well at Ajax. This is how he played. This is the way he played football. Didn't really see it at United. Whereas Amorim, this club needs a shock.
Yeah.
This is the shock.
Yeah, you're right. I do think we need players to come into the first team, and probably, like you said, maybe 4, 5, 6, maybe first team players, and almost drop the current first team down onto the bench.
Exactly.
Whereas other teams get rid of this sort of chaff below the first team. That's so far below the first team. We, no offense to Eriksen and Casemiro, but we saw Newcastle tore us to pieces with that midfield. That's almost an afterthought at this point. It's, can we get players better than Bruno Fernandes and I don't even know, Ugarte? Not can we get players better than Eriksen and Casemiro. That has to be the minimum standard, and not that I'm trying to replace Bruno or Ugarte, but that should be the aim here. Let's get first team players in rather than bridging the gap between the bench and the first team, because that's just too far away. Speaking of, maybe unfortunately, Joshua Zirkzee is a player that's struggled, I think is a fair word to use, in his start to life at Manchester United. Had that, I think, ridiculous sort of jeering and booing the other day when he came off. I think it's embarrassing that happened to him, and any performance, I wouldn't think that that's a fair response to it. But he is struggling to make his mark on the first team. There have been reports that Motta at Juventus is keen on him. Obviously, he was his manager at Bologna as well. What's your understanding of that? There also seems to be this suggestion that Zirkzee doesn't want to leave, and that and potentially even Amorim doesn't want him to leave. What's going on there?
Well, with regard to Zirkzee, first of all, he's walked into a very unsettled Manchester United when he came into the club, and you've also got to remember he was at the Euros with the Netherlands, and so he came later as well, even though they'd signed him pretty early during the transfer window. So pre-season wise, I don't think he was on the tour, was he? Because he was still with the Netherlands and was given a bit of time off after the Euros. So that's always difficult. We've seen it with Rasmus Højlund as well. He didn't have a pre-season at all in his first season, and he had a truncated one in his second season. That's going to impact players as well. And add on to that, Zirkzee not only has come in without effectively a big pre-season, but he's also come in to a new league, and now he's playing under his second manager at the football club as well. Well, you could argue the third manager, because it's such a small sample size. Ruud van Nistelrooy was in charge for 4 games as well. So I think he needs to be given a little bit of time. He wants to be a success at United. Ruben Amorim has said that he wants to keep him. Juventus, as you mentioned, want to do some kind of loan deal. I don't think United would consider a loan for Zirkzee unless there was a situation where they're bringing in 2 or 3 new forward players, and then he goes so far down the pecking order and he gets regular first team football elsewhere. But the interesting link is Thiago Motta, because he played so well under Motta at Bologna, which effectively got him his move to Manchester United. So you can see why the link is there, but all the noises would suggest at this stage that he wants to stay, he wants to fight for his place, and Ruben Amorim wants him to stay as well. And if you look at the every single squad that Ruben Amorim has picked since he's arrived at Manchester United, Zirkzee has been in every single squad. In every single matchday squad, Zirkzee has been in there. So it's clear that he sees something that Zirkzee can bring, and it's clear that he publicly at least is saying that he wants him to remain there.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he can sort of get up to speed and prove to be a vital cog. I think the one issue that he has that's not necessarily his fault, although, you know, if he could score more goals, that would be great, but he's not a particularly prolific goal scorer. And then you pair him with Rashford, who's out of form and now out of the squad, Garnacho, who's out of form, Ahmad, who has been very good but again isn't prolific in front of goal, and Rasmus Højlund, who can't find his shooting boots either. Zirkzee's then like, go on then, get some goals for us, and that's not really his game at the best of times. So I do feel a little bit sorry for Joshua Zirkzee. Let's talk a couple more ins, because there's also been these reports that United want a left wing back, and I think for me, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, getting a striker in, or a top quality striker in January, is always going to be difficult. It's going to be a loan or an older player or something like that. Whereas a left wing back, I feel like typically it's a slightly cheaper position to buy. You know, there might be a few more options in that area. We don't have any wing backs at the club, so bringing one in, you know, can be done for a little bit less money, a little bit less kind of scrutiny as well. You need to get 20 goals between now and the end of the season to be a success. Is that an area you think United can and will strengthen in January? Because it should be surely easier than getting a big goal scorer in.
I mean, what I would say, it's very difficult, full stop, to bring in players in January, particularly good players. If you've got a good player at a successful club, that successful club is very, very reluctant to do any business in the middle of a season, because this player would likely be quite key to what they're doing. But it's clear that Manchester United have an issue in that area. Luke Shaw and Tyrell Malacia simply cannot stay fit. I mean, Malacia, until he came back, was out for the best part of 18 months. Luke Shaw, just don't know when he's going to be coming back. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, Malacia, I think, is fit now anyway. I mean, he's been in a couple of squads. The other thing you've got to take into account is when Luke Shaw does come back, what happens if you bring someone else in at that time, if he still believes Luke Shaw can stay fit for a certain amount of time until the summer. So maybe the summer is the time to really recruit in that area, because it's such an important position for United, unless they can get some sort of short-term deal done. Now, they're clearly looking at that position, because Diego Leon from the Paraguayan club, Cerro Porteño, that deal has been agreed now. We're told that the medical for Leon will happen at some point this month, and thereafter United will officially announce that deal. But he can't actually join in this transfer window because he's only 17. He turns 18 in April. So then once that deal is all rubber stamped, he'll actually join up with Manchester United as an 18-year-old in the summer. So they're already forward planning with regard to the summer transfer window, with a key position that everybody knows they need to strengthen in. The Nuno Mendes one is an interesting one, because PSG's Nuno Mendes, he's only got 18 months left on his contract. Now, all talks so far between PSG and Nuno Mendes have failed to find a resolution over a new contract. So PSG have found themselves in a position. They know that this time next year, and time flies very, very quickly when someone isn't signing a contract, he can sign a pre-contract agreement with a club outside France. So ideal scenario, they want to avoid that situation where Nuno Mendes would leave for free. Of course, they will try and tie him down to a new contract. They won't stop doing that. But something tells me that they will probably have to start listening to offers. Now, I just wonder whether United, because there's clearly an interest there, they're keeping an eye on Nuno Mendes' situation at Paris Saint-Germain. That is definitely 100% clear. It's just whether they can use his contract situation to their advantage. Because the information that I was getting is that they'll probably revisit that one in the summer. But is there an opportunity for maybe some kind of deal to be done if United really want to, trigger that deal in this month's transfer window? Because if he's only got 18 months left, is there an opportunity perhaps United could suggest we could take him on loan, and depending on certain conditions, appearances, all of that kind of thing, what they usually do on a contract, will put an obligation in there to buy him in the summer for a set amount. That way, Paris Saint-Germain probably wouldn't get the money that he would fetch in a normal market if he was under a longer term contract, because he is a very, very good player and a Portuguese international, but they'd probably get more than risk having to lose him for nothing in a year's time or so.
It makes sense, and hopefully for once United can use someone's contract situation to our benefit rather than a contract situation hurting us. Like the amount of times we've let players go for very little money, and somehow it seems like we still play top dollar for anyone we want to bring in. But I mean, Nuno Mendes would be certainly a start down that left hand side, wouldn't he? And it's good that Diego Leon deal is all but done as well. Other players, Casemiro, another big one. And mostly in terms of wages, you look at some of the people we mentioned, and we're going to talk about Eriksen soon as well. Rashford, Eriksen and Casemiro, between them, you're looking at about £700,000 a week there. Yeah. You know, are the rumours of the potential Saudi deal true with Casemiro? Is that something that you can see happening in either January or potentially in the summer?
It's still early in the window, but there's clearly Saudi interest in Casemiro, and it's clear that Manchester United would consider offers for him. There's lots of talk about Al Nassr, isn't there? Yep. Cristiano Ronaldo, and there's noises coming from that side of it suggesting that Ronaldo would welcome Casemiro coming to Al Nassr. So definitely one to watch that one. I mean, United are probably looking at it and thinking, as you've mentioned there, the wages, the age of the player, the remainder of his contract, it's not a good situation to be in, because this all goes back to what happened in that summer of 2022 when there was panic stations all over the place when United didn't get the players that they wanted, in particular Frankie de Jong. Sorry to bring his name back up again.
We're all scarred
when they chased him when they chased him all summer, and then in the end it was almost like, we need to bring someone in. We've just lost the first 2 games of the season, Brentford, and horrifically to Brentford, and then the home before that, the home game to Brighton. They wanted to back Erik ten Hag because they brought him in and really not delivered for him. So it was kind of panicked into doing a big deal for a player who was never going to have a sell on. But, you know, the Saudi opportunity represents something for United and every other Premier League club, if players want to go there, of recouping some of that money. So it's clear that United would consider offers from Saudi. It's just whether those offers are going to be concrete enough for them to be able to do that kind of deal in this transfer window.
Okay. I mean, hopefully we can. It's weird though, isn't it? Because all the things we're hearing, if we get rid of all these players that we want to get rid of or that are available to leave, we're going to have about 11 players in the squad, and you got to hope that some of these people don't get injured. But I guess with all of these windows, you're not going to get rid of everyone you want, and you're not going to bring in everyone that you want. Another player that looks like he could be on the way out is Antony. Again, there's been reports from Spain and even Greece that there might be teams interested in him. Is that someone United are willing to let go? And again, does there seem to be concrete interest for Antony?
Number one, I think United would consider offers for him. You mentioned the clubs in Spain and Greece. I'm told it's gone actually further than interest, that the clubs in Spain and Greece have actually contacted United about a possible loan deal for Antony. This is a player, I mean, we talked about Casemiro, that summer of 2022, he was another player that United perhaps could have got well earlier, much earlier in the transfer window for less than half the price, because Ajax would have sold him for 30 or 40 million because they would have had time to get someone else in. In the end, United ended up paying 82 million, which, I mean, it beggars belief, doesn't it, when you look back on it now? Yeah. It really is. And so rather like the Sancho situation, rather like the Rashford situation, I know there hasn't been any kind of falling out or perceived falling out between the manager and Antony, because he has featured in some squads of late. But the fact of the matter is, it looks like United are listening to offers for him. And if you were to try and sell him in this transfer window, you're not going to get much, because he actually hasn't started a Premier League game this season. So rather like the Rashford situation, if you can get Antony maybe out on a straight loan, maybe with an option or at least a straight loan, as that calculated risk, isn't it? If he can go away and perform well, then at least his market value will go a little bit higher in the summer, so that United can recoup a small percentage of that 82 million. I mean, they're not going to get anywhere near it. I mean, people are even talking about, are they going to even get 20 million for someone like Antony? If they did, you know, they'd probably consider offers of that amount, I would think, because at the moment, the market value for him is not very, very high, simply because it will be known that United are listening to offers and they're not picking him. And so it's not a good combination for them. So again, well, as we were mentioning before, it's just one of these things that United just might have to do. They're just going to have to bite the bullet on certain deals, and the optics aren't going to look great. Look how much money they've lost on this player. Look how much money they've lost on this player. Well, so be it. They're going to have to do it, because to move forward, they need to start getting the squad together that's not only going to fit what Ineos and Ruben Amorim wants, but also fit the formation that Amorim's playing.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and not that transfers and football should just be about, you know, pluses and minuses and did you make profit, yes or no. But I think, like, you look at the Sancho one that we mentioned before, you look at the Antony deal as well. These are deals that we're losing like 50 million plus on. It's not like we bought Lukaku for 75, sold him for 65. Yeah. That's a loss, but it kind of, whatever. We had him for 2 years. These are like, between the two of them, we're losing around 100 million pounds on Sancho and Antony. If Antony is to leave.
It's a litany in the past 10 years. With the Pogba one.
Yeah.
The Pogba one.
Yeah.
If he'd worked out, I don't think we'd be talking about it. No. But the general consensus is, it was a very hit and miss return for Pogba. You let him go for free, you buy him for 90 million, and then you let him go for free again.
Yeah,
they need to. I think United have realised, especially with the new structure, this stuff is not going to happen anymore. No. And if it means that we have to make a loss now for the short-term pain in order to get United's house in order with the players who will want to play for United in the formation that Amorim wants, and have the right character of player, because that's what's been levelled against this United squad as well. What kind of atmosphere is engendered within that squad? Yep. And it's been the same case for the past 3 or 4 managers. The manager's wrong. It's one thing saying that, but more people now are questioning, is it now the players?
Yeah.
So if they've now decided that this is the right manager, then they've clearly decided, well, some of the players aren't right.
Yeah.
So we need to help the manager in that case.
Absolutely. And even a player like Joshua Zirkzee, who's come in, it's not quite working out how we'd hoped, and he may even, potentially be on the way out already. Because we only paid 40 million for him, you can't, it's literally impossible to lose as much on him as we did on Antony. And I think we'd probably get most of what we paid for Zirkzee back if he was to go somewhere. So even just spending a bit less on players and getting some shrewd deals, hopefully, that'll be something that United can kind of mitigate any real disasters with. Just one final question. Obviously you came on the show plenty of times last January, and it was just an absolute bore fest. Not the videos, but United's window was just sorry, I should have maybe phrased that the other way around, so you knew I wasn't insulting you there. United just basically didn't do anything all window when we hoped they would. Do you think, obviously this is just your opinion, not do you think there will be a little bit more movement this window than we got in the last January window?
Certainly without. It's probably not what you want to hear. But I think if an opportunity arises for potentially a longer term target or a loan that looks too good to turn down, United want to be in a position where they can act. But United, like with every other club, and I'm not saying that they're sailing close to the PSR regulations, but every club is got that in the back of the mind. It is a shadow over every single transfer window just now. And so by June the 30th, United and all these other clubs don't want to be in a position whereby they're scrambling around in the month of June, trying to raise funds to, first of all, meet PSR regulations, and then be in a position where they can go for it somewhat in the transfer window. That's why at the moment, we seem to be hearing about a lot of departures. And I think that is almost like the setup for what they want to do in the summer, because like I say, I go back to what Amorim said. He wanted to come in the summer because it is a clean break, and that's the time when United will do the majority of their business. But what he's now having to do is run the rule over various players that are in the squad, and maybe this will work out for him as well, because if he hadn't been here now, who's to say we wouldn't have had all these issues come next summer? Because he would maybe, if he was going to come next summer, and there was an interim manager until the end of the season, the strong likelihood is all of the players that United are looking at maybe to get rid of in January or ahead of the summer, he might have that problem at the start of the summer, which is United do not want. United want to be in a position where they can actually say, right, let's move forward with transfers incoming to this club in the summer. Let's get them ready for pre-season. Let's get them on the pre-season tour. They want all of that in place, because far too many times they've done so many deals that have come too late, and fans are like, why aren't United doing business? And then when they do business, there's a little bit of excitement because it's happened just before the window, but the season's already started. They haven't had a pre-season. He needs to get as many of his players that are going to be playing for him as early as he can next summer's transfer window.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, thank you, Dharmesh, for coming on. You'll be back on throughout the window as well, bringing us all of those updates as they happen. Hopefully, United, whether it's ins or outs or both, ideally, can actually, like you said, get this sort of squad turning a little bit, because there's too many players where you go, now he's exiled, he never gets to play, he's not bothered. Like, we've got a squad full of players that you never want to see play. That's not good, is it? We need a streamlined squad full of players who, on any given day, can turn up and win games for Manchester United. So hopefully we can get there. Thank you very much, Dharmesh. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us at home as well. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This has been a transfer video with Dharmesh Sheth from Sky Sports News. We'll see you in a bit.